I'd like to call the Rules and City Government Committee to order. Please note for the record, all members are present, Alderman Arnett and Alderman Savage. First item is approval of the agenda.
Move approval of the agenda.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The next item, approval of the minutes from the June 11th meeting.
Move approval of the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have 3 appointments or reappointments. The first is the reappointment of Peggy Townsend to the Ethics Commission. Is Ms. Townsend here? No. We'll go on in case she shows up. The next appointment is of Ms. O'Neill, and I think Hillary's, well, let's go down to Roberto Veloso. Okay, we're batting 1,000.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
the first one is a reappointment.
Okay, so you want to take that
So I'm,
as a
yeah,
reappointment?
so I'm okay recommending that one since they're not here.
I just wanted to ask her because she went to my wife's high school.
Well,
This is the second time it's been on.
I'm sorry?
This is the second time it's been on.
It's the second time that's been on the agenda, you said? Well, what is your pleasure? We have her application and her resume, and it is a reappointment to the Ethics Commission. Ms. Raftovich, we are on the very first appointment, Ms. Peggy Townsend. It's a reappointment to the Ethics Commission.
She's not present.
She's not here.
Okay. I don't have the, I'm sorry, Karma was the only one I knew was not going to be here today, so I don't have hers in front of me.
We do have her application and resume that's attached.
Okay.
And it is a reappointment, so unless there are any objections.
Her
I believe it might be a new appointment. That one started before I came back to the city. Was it printed as a reappointment?
Yeah.
I believe she's a new appointment. I got a call from the chair of that committee, Mr. Dolezal, asking me about that appointment. I thought it had already gone through, so I put it back on your docket because I was informed that she was supposed to come before you before and was not available.
I think it must be a new, she's only lived here for 2 years.
And
Yes.
that's
But
what I'm
her
reading.
resume is incredible. Gotta
Under,
capture her.
on her application, she says she wants to get involved, and this is the
Yes.
opportunity.
Yeah, so I think that was a
clearly
typo.
It's an initial appointment. So do we want to postpone action on, in the past, we've said reappointments we could take without the person being here, but initial appointments, we wanted them.
How many
To be here.
vacancies on the Ethics Commission?
They can continue to function without her, if you'd like to move that to your September meeting.
Okay, what's your pleasure? Are you comfortable with moving it,
I'd
or are you
probably,
comfortable with acting on it?
I'll do either, but I'd probably prefer to postpone until we hear from the new appointments.
Alderman Arnett?
Either way is fine with me. I think I like the tradition we've started of hearing from people directly. Maybe this is. So I think postpone.
Okay, so we will postpone action on this appointment until the September meeting. The next appointment is of Karma O'Neill to the Arts in Public Places. Ms. Raftovich, you.
So Ms. O'Neill has been here in Annapolis for over 20 years. She served on the PTA for Germantown Homewood. She was president of Germantown Homewood PTA. And one of the unique skills that she brings to this, she's an event planner, which is important to this board. Art in Public Places more and more is doing events in addition to supporting visual arts. They do the concert series down at the dock. And specifically, one thing that she does that I thought was really great for this board is that she does the booking for the town center concerts. So she's familiar with the process for booking artists, which the Art in Public Places does the booking for City Dock. So I was hoping she could bring some of those skills here to the city.
I think now I recognize the name.
Yes, she's, her husband used to be president of the Downtown Business Association, Sean O'Neill.
Okay. Questions?
I would move we recommend approval to the council.
Is there a second?
Second.
Further discussion? Questions? Hearing none, all in favor of making a favorable recommendation for Karma O'Neill to the Art and Public Places Commission, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you very
And
much.
Ms. Ratrovich, the last one is Roberto Veloso. He's not here either.
Roberto Veloso served on this commission for many years on the Civil Service Board, and our current chair, Tony Christoph, has asked to step down. He's apparently been trying to step down for some years, and we just keep not replacing him. So he recommended that Mr. Veloso return, and I spoke with him. He may be, I know he was traveling when I spoke with him, but he was hoping to be back in time to be here for this meeting. He's got a great resume, as you can see, and this board in particular represents the employees of the city of Annapolis, so we were seeking a diverse candidate who could well represent the diversity of our employees here in the city. And he is in himself diverse and also is well educated on the topic. He's served on national diversity boards, so I thought he would be a good fit.
So is Mr. Christoph going to hang around until his appointment is made?
Doesn't have a choice.
He is very anxious to get off of this board, so he's just waiting to be replaced.
How many vacancies are there?
Quite a few, unfortunately, on this board. There's, I think there are 5 seats on the board. There will only be 3 filled with Mr. Veloso's. So Tony hasn't been able to step down because we wouldn't even have a quorum without him. So this will bring us back to a quorum, but we still have 2 more seats to fill. So please send me your recommendations for that board. It's a particularly important board right now because they're doing they're finishing the comp and class study. So, and those all get signed off on by the Civil Service Board. So. Very important.
Okay, so we've just said the person wasn't here, we would postpone action.
This one's sort of like a reappointment, though, because he did serve on this board before for about 12 years, I think.
And I guess what this speaks to is the inability for the board to function if the appointment is delayed.
Indeed.
So what is your pleasure, gentlemen?
I guess I would feel a little bit better if we were meeting next month, but to go 2 months on all of these, we're struggling to keep our boards and commissions up to at least a quorum. So again, I'd rather speak to them and be able to tell them how much we appreciate their volunteerism. Maybe in this case, these 3 cases, we need to bend the rules.
So on Mr. Veloso, are you making a motion
I move
to?
that we recommend approval for his appointment/reappointment.
Second.
Okay, further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the appointment/reappointment of Roberto Veloso to the Civil Service Board, please say aye.
Aye.
Now, Alderman, based on what you just said, do you want to revisit the reappointment of Ms. Townsend? Did we take a position on her? We did.
I think we decided to postpone.
Oh, we postponed hers.
Can I
even-
make a motion to reconsider postponement?
Yeah, second. I mean, the
Okay.
resume is incredible, and she lives right downtown, and seems like we don't want to run the risk of losing this candidate.
I think you made a good point in terms of we're not meeting next month, and we've already postponed 1 month for this individual.
Okay, so there's a motion to reconsider. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So the motion, someone making a
I
motion
move
to,
we recommend Ying Townsend to the council for approval for the
Ethics Commission.
Ethics Commission.
Second.
Okay, further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the recommendation of the reappointment of Pegeen Townsend to the Ethics Commission, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next legislation before the committee, CA 719, City Clerk, for the purpose of removing the city clerk from the supervision of the mayor. Is there anyone who would like to speak on CA 719? Seeing none. Alderman?
Oh, you mean from the audience?
No.
Yeah, so this is introduced by Alderwoman Tierney, and I think I joined it as a co-sponsor. But the intention is to, I believe, we were essentially trying to, now that we have an Office of Law created, the intention is to have the city clerk be underneath, a little bit insulated from politics from mayor's office, regardless of who's in the mayor's office. And so this would essentially remove the city clerk, the charter amendment would remove the city clerk section of the charter, which states that it's appointed by the mayor and is located in the office of the mayor. And then the next piece of legislation would create the corresponding code that would state that the city clerk's office is supervised by the city attorney, who reports directly to the mayor, and then lists supervising the duties of the city clerk's office underneath the Office of Law, city attorney's description.
Thank you for that summary of. So is, would you like to make a motion to support or to give a favorable recommendation?
I'll move a favorable recommendation.
Second.
Okay, further discussion? In addition to what you said, I think this keeps us in line with past practice, with the city clerk being in the law department and answering to the city attorney. So, okay, hearing no further discussion, all in favor of giving a favorable recommendation to CA 719, please say aye.
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 Okay, and you are listed as a sponsor on that one.
Yeah.
I think I asked to be a sponsor on that also. The next item is 02319, which is the corresponding ordinance addressing the city clerk for the purpose of transferring the city clerk to the Office of Law, changing the appointing authority of the city clerk, updating the duties of the city attorney and the city clerk, and making certain stylistic changes.
I'll move that we recommend favorably.
Second.
Discussion?
I'm looking at the strikeouts on page 2. The city clerk shall advertise all elections, and the city clerk shall prepare legislation at the request of the mayor. I can understand striking the second one, but hasn't traditionally the election stuff been managed by the city clerk, and are we now eliminating that function?
I have to wonder whether this was deleted because we put our elections in the hands of the county. But that's not quite how it happened last week, so.
No. Or at the last set of elections, and we may have solicited the help of the county, but it does seem like the city clerk is pretty integral.
She did a lot of the work. Our city manager, Ms. Sutherland,
Hi.
can you speak to this?
Yes, the elections are administered by the Board of Elections. The city clerk assists the Board of Elections, but it is not the city clerk who administers elections.
Where is that in the code?
I don't know, Alderman Arnett.
I just want to
The
make sure we
city,
don't,
when Linda Short was the acting city attorney, she drafted this, and I believe that was the reasoning.
elections for,
I'm looking at the language, and it says, "Shall advertise all elections which are held under the charter and make a return of the same in the manner now provided for by the laws regulating elections." Is there another?
so it's under Title IV. They do the voting devices, the ballots, campaign, contributions, expenditures, judge. Judges and elections.
Well, Teresa, I already called Regina. Probably want to get Regina.
This, I'm looking at.
I don't see anything in Title IV that talks about advertising. Notice of elections, except as otherwise provided by law, the board shall publish for all elections for 2 consecutive days prior to each election and 1 or more. So there is that in the code that is part of the Board of Elections responsibility. So it seems like this strikeout is appropriate. It's now, it is being done by the board under 408090.
Okay, which is a different section than, we're in Chapter 2, you're in
Right, well,
Chapter...
but I'm just wanting to make sure the Board of
Okay.
Election is picking this up, and it seems like they are in the code, so I don't have a problem with the strikeout.
Okay, I'm looking at page 2, line 21, letter A. The mayor has a strike through. The city attorney shall appoint a person to serve as city clerk and as a person to serve as deputy city clerk. And I assume the city clerk has looked at this for consistency.
Well, so here's another, because the city clerk we're keeping as civil service.
Right.
So once the city clerk is selected, unless the city clerk leaves or is fired, there, I mean,
I thought it was exempt.
I don't think it is. We
I think we talked-
It is
specifically
exempt.
didn't want it. Is it?
I mean,
Well, let's
think it
ask
is.
gonna ask
Regina.
about-
Ms. Eldridge, we have some questions about the city clerk.
Do you know anything about the city clerk?
Okay, we can help you.
We're looking at the part of the code that says the mayor has a strike through. City attorney shall appoint a person to serve as city clerk and a person to serve as deputy city clerk. Your position is civil service, and you're exempt, right?
All right, and I don't think you're both.
Or you're not
one or the
exempt.
other. You're civil service.
I am civil service. The exempt question, I don't know the answer to that part.
This was an issue under the last administration, not this administration, but I guess if there's a new city attorney, can the new city attorney select a new city clerk?
Not if it's civil servant.
No,
Well, that's why it's important to know if it's civil service or exempt.
I am
didn't-
civil service.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It's not on the exempt list, the budget stuff we just went through.
Okay.
And I think that was by intent.
I think that's more
So-
appropriate, yeah.
I mean, the language is a little loose here, but it clearly is the primary intent of the legislation that this be moved to the Office of Law and be reporting to the city attorney as a subcomponent.
I think what concerns me is that the city attorney appoints the city clerk and the deputy.
We could,
Because that would suggest that the city attorney could also remove the city
So
clerk.
every employee in city government has an appointing authority, whether you are in the exempt service or you are in the civil service. Everyone has an appointing authority.
Appointing authority, you're saying?
Yes, appointing authority. So in this case, the city attorney will be the appointing authority for the city clerk. It is a civil service position because in the city code and the personnel code, you haven't put it in the exempt service.
Right.
So it does not serve at the pleasure of the city attorney. It has the position has civil service protections. What it's saying is, when there's a vacancy and it's advertised, it's going to be the city attorney who decides what person fills the position as a civil
yeah,
service employee.
through a competitive, civil
Right.
service process, right.
Okay.
It's not appointed serving at the pleasure. It is a civil service position.
Okay. All right, are there any other questions about the strike-throughs or the additions? I see the word alderwoman has been added. Anything else? Seeing nothing? There's a motion that we give a favor, was there a motion? Is there a
Yes.
motion on the floor? Yeah. That we give a favorable recommendation for O2319. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
ma'am. The next item is O2619, rental unit and short-term residential rental licenses. And I don't think I need to read all of that again.
So there's several amendments from the administration and newer batch again today.
I see the mayor's staff report to mayor. Where are the, do we have amendments from the mayor's office?
They're in the staff
In the-
report on the last page.
There's comments from the city manager, and then there are
Okay.
suggested amendments from the Department of Planning and Zoning. And then today, we got notice of more amendments. Are you going to speak to that, Director
Dr.
Nash?
Nash?
More amendments from?
Yeah.
We don't have those yet, though. I mean, we got them by email, but,
The same thing that's in the staff report.
Okay,
They're just drafted in the amendment form.
okay.
okay. So these are comments from the city manager, or are these,
These-
no, these are from the
Are
planning and
these-
zoning department.
Is this the 11 amendments that we got an email today? And that subsumes what was in the staff report?
Yes.
Okay? So, we
Okay.
were promised hard copies. Are there some hard copies of this so we can flip back and forth between the code and the amendments? Well, yeah.
So these are the planning and zoning's amendments? Or are these all?
And Madam Chair,
Yeah.
I do have a few questions related to the underlying ordinance at some point.
The underlying what?
The underlying ordinance.
Okay, you want to go back to the original before we take up the amendments?
I'll leave that up to you.
I mean, that's fine. You have questions about the original language?
What's, yeah, some of the other provisions, although we, I think we could do that after the amendments if you want to go through
Okay,
staff
well, we
first,
can-
that's fine.
All right, so we'll take up planning director's amendments.
All right, thank you. So I'm Sally Nash, Department of Planning and Zoning, and our department has been working on this ordinance for a long time with you. And today we met with Chris Ledoux to go through some of the amendments we had suggested in the staff report and kind of formalize them into different formatting. So it's easier to see where they are in the proposed ordinance and clarify a few things that we had said in our staff report that I think still weren't quite clear. So we worked out language that hopefully makes sense to everyone in our amendments. So,
Dr. Nash, you gave us one document which has 11 amendments, and then I'm looking at what's attached in our iPads. Are they
Yeah.
separate?
So you can see that the First Amendment here is that striking out upon conviction.
okay?
And then, so I think this is meant to supersede what is in the staff report. It's an update.
Okay.
that's right. We've taken what we put in our staff report. We're on pages 4 and 5. Is that what you're looking at on your
Yes,
iPad?
yeah.
And refine them a little bit into what you now have in front of you.
So 4 and 5 is the actual language with the amendments included.
No, page
Right.
45 is of the
Right.
staff report.
Page 4, for example, just what you pointed out.
It has more of the language from the
Yeah,
code. And
okay.
then what you have in front of you just has the exact amendment.
Okay. So there are no line numbers.
Right. So I suggest for now, ignore the staff report proposed amendments
Okay.
and just go back and forth between the document I just handed you and the proposed ordinance.
Right.
Okay.
So starting with the first one, it's page 2, line 23.
Upon conviction, goes away.
Right. Strike upon conviction.
Okay. What's your pleasure, committee members? Do you want to take these individually, or do you want to try to deal with them as a group?
I think individually, as I suppose, as we go through them. work
Okay,
for me.
so I need a motion. The first one is to strike upon conviction in line 23, page 2, line 23.
I'll move amendment number 1.
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Dr. Nash?
Okay, thank you. Amendment 2 is on page 3, lines 10 and 12. We wanted to clarify that sometimes there's a situation where there's one license per one dwelling unit, but sometimes there's a situation where there's one license per premises, and then the number of units is noted on that license. And then there's some situations where people might live in one unit but rent out another unit, and it didn't really fall into anything that was described in the proposed ordinance. So we wanted to clarify that there could be a situation where you have more than one dwelling unit, but it's not the entire premises. So that's why we just want to add a S to units.
Okay,
I
that's
move.
amendment 2.
I move, we recommend approval for amendment number 2.
Second.
That the, I guess it's the Rules and City Government recommends amendment number 2 to the council.
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Great. Amendment number 3.
All right, page 4. Really just clarifying this language on line 33.
So it's adding a whole new language set, 30 days prior to expiration. Any application to renew rental operating license for which an application is not received at least 30 days prior to the expiration of the current operating license is subject to an additional fee. So this is an administrative process.
Right, it's just to clarify when we need the applications and when we would charge a late fee.
Yeah, as the staff report pointed out, I believe from the city manager, that existing language contradicts itself a bit. It says you can't submit, and then it says if you do submit within that 30 window, you get a fee assessed. So this clears it up.
Exactly.
So we're replacing the new letter D. In essence, we're striking out lines 33 through 38 and replacing them with the language that you just read.
Right.
Motion?
I move that the Rules Committee recommend amendment number 3, or adopt amendment number 3.
Second.
Okay, further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Madam Chair, may I ask a question? So this is the first I've seen these amendments. They are not in proper amendment form. May I assume that the committee will not object to the Office of Law getting these in the proper form, knowing that it's not changing the content of the amendment?
I don't think we object to that.
Okay.
What is the proper form?
I was going to ask that.
Well, so for example, amendment number 3 should simply be on page 4, on page 4, strike lines 33 through 38 in their entirety and substitute an application to renew a rental operating license. And you put the language in. It's formatting, and I'm trying really, really hard to get our amendments in proper amendment form.
We know you are, and we appreciate that.
Okay, that's fine, as long as it doesn't change
Just wanted to make
the-
sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, amendment number 4, Dr. Nash.
All right, page 6.
This is adding a sentence, a part of the sentence.
On line 8, before upon, we want to include upon receipt of a complaint under this section or
Or a recommendation
a
by
recommendation by the chief
Okay.
of police.
Move that we adopt this amendment.
Second.
Okay, further discussion?
Also on page 6.
Okay, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, number 5.
Getting rid of this conviction again.
5, it's also on page 6.
I move that we recommend favorably amendment number 5.
Second?
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Number 6,
Page 7.
page 7,
Oh, dear.
23.
Another upon conviction goes away.
I
So you all
move.
didn't like upon conviction, huh?
There's no conviction in this ordinance.
I think we
think
might have a
that's-
problem with Amendment 6. I don't see, I think it's at the owner upon
Is that the
conviction?
s-
No,
Amendment 6 on page 7.
Director is page 7.
It's another delete upon conviction, right?
Yeah, I think that's right, yeah. When you do enforcement actions, you can't wait for the courts to rule on a conviction.
I'm not seeing.
Oh,
where
I'm
the
sorry. It's
upon-
line 33.
Okay,
That's the issue.
because it's not 23, line 33. Okay,
Move we adopt Amendment number 7?
Second?
6.
6? All right,
Second.
got ahead.
Okay, amendment number 6.
Yeah.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And that is line 23 as opposed,
33.
33 as opposed to 23.
Well, okay, 33, right.
Yeah.
Can I move that we recommend favorably amendment 7?
Second?
Yes. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Did we check to make sure that's the right? Yeah, it is, okay. Number 8,
Page 8.
page 8.
Page 8, line 15.
Line 15.
A person,
Yeah, I was confused by this.
Dr. Nash, could you, in the city, a person owning, you want to strike out or renting of premises with dwelling units above commercial and maritime uses?
right. That would be a sublease situation, which there would already be other issues going on with that. We're trying to focus on, legal, people operating legally as an owner who are renting out their building.
So if this existed, it would be illegal already without
Yes.
this language?
If you're renting and then renting out what you're renting.
Yeah, okay.
So page 8.
So that's page 8, line 15. Is there a motion?
I'll move. Second?
Move we,
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, amendment 9, page 9, line 24.
page 9, 24. Oh, it's just changing it from 3 months to 90 days. Now that, I think, we heard from...
No, not,
I'm
amendment
sorry,
9.
I jumped to 11. Where's
Yeah,
Line 24.
line 24.
Where the entire premises is rented with the absence.
So we're striking out dwelling unit and say premise is rented?
Well, I'm guessing because premise would include dwelling units.
That's right. The entire premises is rented.
Read it without Dr. Nash? Where the entire premises
Strike dwelling or dwelling unit.
Oh,
rented?
oh, I'm sorry. Wait,
Yeah, it
just a
is.
second. Let's see.
Is rented. Where the entire premises is rented with the absence from the premises of the owner.
With the absence from the premises.
How? What is the distinction between premise and dwelling unit in the first place?
Sometimes they are the same thing, but sometimes there is more than one dwelling unit in a premises.
So this would mean the entire premise, not part of the, now no longer not part of the premise? So like if you had a building that had 2 units in it, this is saying the entire, for greater than 100 cumulative days per year where the entire premise is rented.
With the absence from the premises of the owner. So it's when the entire house or premises is being rented and the owner is not there.
What if part of it is rented and the owner's not there? So if there's more than one dwelling unit in the building. I think, from my recollection of the discussion of this, it feels like it's better the way it was.
I'm also not clear how you would define absence from the premises by the owner. There's no time period specified.
time period is specified, it's 120 days.
Well, yeah, but does that mean absence of if the owner's absent from the premises for that entire 120 days, or just a few? That's what it doesn't really clarify.
It's the cumulative of 120 days.
Right. But the absence of the owner means that it's not an owner-occupied dwelling, right? It's
Well,
an
it is
individual.
if the owner is living there for 6 months of the year, and then is not there for 4 months of the year.
So could you please, by making this change, what is becoming different? By striking or dwelling unit?
Entire premise or dwelling unit is rented. Let me check on that one, and
Okay.
let's table that one for now, and I'll get more clarification on that one.
Madam Chair?
Dr. Nash, I think part of the question has to be whether we're talking about the difference between the premises and the dwelling units, or the owner the owner's absence from the premise.
Right, which this amendment doesn't really address anyway.
Doesn't define it.
Yeah, so you seem like you might have another issue with this part of the proposed ordinance.
So we have two classes of buildings. One is owner-occupied, where the owner is leasing out some or all of the building. And the other is a non-owner occupied building. They have their own building, and then they have another building in town, which this legislation allows.
I think that this issue is the same as Amendment 2, but for some reason we resolved it differently, and I'm not sure why. But speaking to just our amendment, not the other issue, I think it would be better if we did, or dwelling units are rented.
So we
For
won't
Amendment
strike
9.
out, we'll just put an S on the end of unit.
Yes.
Okay.
That's our Amendment 9. There's still the issue of clarifying the language of rented with the absence from the premises of the owner. But I think that is just as long as they are not there for 120 days, they can rent a dwelling unit or the entire premises, as long as they're there for the other days.
So we would change Amendment 9 to not strike, but to just put an S on the end of unit.
That's
instead of
right.
Units. All right. So
And
that
change
would-
is to R.
And change is to R.
Right. All right, that makes more sense to me.
Alderman?
Yeah, I'm good with that. But I do still have questions about the absence from the premise and how to clarify that.
Okay?
But if you want to take that separately, it's fine by me.
Okay.
Are we ready to vote on
The amendment
Move
as
a-
amended.
this
Move a
amendment?
favorable recommendation for Amendment 9 as amended.
Second?
Okay. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And this is Amendment 9 as amended.
Right.
Ms. Green, you have all that? Okay. All right, Amendment 10. Dr. Nash?
All right, page 10.
He's striking all
31, we want to take out this language because there's a lot of situations where homeowners put their home as a trust, put trust as instead of their names on their tax records, and we don't mean to say that those people can't rent out their homes.
Being one of those people who has his home in trust, I appreciate this So I would move that favorably for amendment number 10.
Second.
I think,
Okay.
Can we vote?
Yeah, I was just reading the rest of it to see how many other entities were included other than trust.
That's exactly what I was just asking. This isn't just solving that issue. Is the intent of the bill's sponsors, who are
Two of
sitting
us.
before me, is it that you have to be the owner of a principal residence to have a short-term rental in Annapolis, where that residence is your primary residence?
That's one category. The other is you can be a resident of the city of Annapolis and own a second home that can be put into short-term rental.
But you have to have a principal residence, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Then I think the best thing to do is to link it to you, in order to be a license, to get a license, you have to have a property in the city of Annapolis that is your principal residence as designated in the State Department of Assessments and Taxation's records,
Right.
period. So anybody, I don't know that a trust qualifies for that. I'm kind of surprised by that from my experience, but I could be wrong and just never have seen that. But if the intent is that you have to be someone who lives in the city and it's your you have to have a principal residence in the city,
Right.
then you simply link it to the SSTAT records.
Right. Yep.
And then you don't have to go into who isn't allowed, it's who is allowed.
Right. So that, by striking all of this, these last several sentences, I think we make it clean as you're suggesting.
No, I don't, because you're saying a driver's license, filing income tax returns, that kind of thing. You
Well,
could
how-
have someone who has a principal residence, I think, and has like a out-of-state military driver's license,
Right.
right? So I'm not sure that this is the proper criteria, and we can come up with language that is.
What if
So-
we,
Go ahead.
I was going to propose, if we kept the first sentence and at the end just said, after, so this is principal residence means the premises designated by a person for the legal purposes of voting, obtaining a driver's license or Maryland identification card, and filing income tax returns. Could we put a comma and say with an address within the city of Annapolis?
Or to make it simpler, maybe, that sentence that begins on line 31, for the purpose of the chapter, person may have one principal residence to which they pay to whatever the taxation code that. you
Right, so this is saying the director may rely on SSTAT's records to do that. I would say that in order for it to be a principal residence, you're going by the definition in state law that allows it to be listed as a principal residence by SSTAT. And that is what we will rely on. So we don't have to make a determination on your driver's license and where you file your income taxes. We're going to make everybody give us a copy of their tax return and their driver's license and everything that goes with it? Or are we just going to look in SSTAT and say, oh yeah, it's a principal residence?
Well,
Check.
Point of information about that, though. Look, when we verify addresses for election purposes for candidates, it's based on your voter registration address.
It's not your principal residence necessarily. You could rent an apartment and be eligible to run for an office, and the Board of Elections will look it up and say that's where your residence is for your address for election purposes. That doesn't make it your principal residence. Principal residence is somebody owns a piece of property, they live in it is their primary residence for more than 6 months of the year, which means they're paying, everybody's paying property taxes, but it means they're filing a residential income tax return, and SSTAT matches up the property tax records with the income tax records. We don't have access to income tax records. People aren't going to give us copies of their income tax returns.
No, I'm just saying, but I think that is how the election code is worded. It says they have to reside in the city of Annapolis for at least 6 months, or in your ward for at least 6 months. And so, but that's a different standard that we're using.
It is a
I
different,
think
so this
I mean,
strikeout-
separate issue, but I think the issue underlying, what I'm getting at is the issue of establishing residency or principal residence. I think we should probably use the same standard for different sections
Well, we
of the
just
code.
we just did a standard for residential parking permits, where we have residential and non-residential parking permits now, and we link the residential to it being your primary residence in the SSTAT records.
Right. So this strikeout was done with John, Manessa, and Pete when he was still here. And Pete's the one that recommended that we strike all of the lines after the middle of line 31, because for administrative purposes, so that planning and zoning could manage this. So
Well, is there any reason we wouldn't do it the same way as we did the parking? Because that seems pretty easy to me. I heard someone say, yes.
I'm not really sure.
Oh,
I'm not sure how
you
we
wouldn't
did
use
the parking.
SDOT?
Okay. All right.
So maybe we should postpone action on amendment number 10 also, unless you have the language.
Well, this was from Pete and John Manessa, but that was a few months ago. and Pete's no longer here, so I was happy with the amendment the way it was, but I don't care. We can table it and hear more testimony.
Okay, are you good?
I'll leave it to the sponsors on that one.
Yeah, well, I think we should table it. We'll come back to
Okay.
it. And then maybe we'll have some language
All right.
okay.
Excuse me, but in coming up with the language, your intent is that it be a property owner who owns a residence that is their principal residence as designated by SSTAT, correct? Alderman Arnett? Okay.
I mean, you're making me question, the notion we had is if you have a principal residence, you can, X amount of the year, lease out some or all of that residence as a short-term rental. If you have a principal residence and you own another residence in town, you can use that other residence for short-term rental up to the limits of the legislation.
But
The number of days.
if I live here for 5 months and 30 days, if I live here 180 days and I live in Florida 185 days, I can't do it at all. Is that correct?
I don't know the rules in terms of what you claim as your principal
That,
residence.
if, you have to be here for 183 days.
Okay. All right.
So is that your intent? Is
That
if
is
you're
the
not,
intent.
it is the intent, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
amendment
So,
number
11,
11,
page 4.
page 4, line 25.
After registry, we're adding if applicable to the premises. We're fine with me. I move we accept that. Well, we're going to do all three of them at the same time? So that one is fine with me, and I would move that we accept that amendment. The next one on page 9,
Dr. Nash, may I ask, was this one of the amendments? This
No,
is-
these are additional amendments that we just saw today, but we agreed to include them with our other amendments.
Okay. So do you want to take them separately? Is that what you're saying, Alderman?
either way is fine with me. I do have a question about the one on page 9, changing it from 3 months to 90 days actually reduces the amount of time, or could, and we heard from Mr. Bariano, who
It's gone.
has gone. This 90 days has to do with the delegates being here. And what he said is sometimes they get here a little bit early for committee meetings, and sometimes they stay a little later to wrap up, which I accept. We're the capital city, and we need to be aware of the needs of our delegates. So 3 months is more than 90 days. I tried to get Mr. Bariano to testify or give us a number, and I saw him again at another event and asked him again. He didn't have a specific number. I think we want to accommodate our delegates, so maybe it's,
I think the state law says that after 90 days, you have to have a lead certificate.
you have to have a what?
A lead certificate.
Let's leave it at 90 days. And we'll let the delegates sort it out.
For some
Right.
reason, I had written during the finance committee that we came up with 100, but if it's
I was
the
thinking the
lead
same thing,
requirement,
but-
then that negates that. Okay.
And then the last one is just applicable laws applicable, which is nice. So I would move that we accept all three of these changes in Amendment 11.
I'll second.
Okay, further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right.
I don't know if you want to take up the wording of the absent owner premises.
Before you get there, do you want to go over one more thing in the staff report that isn't addressed by these amendments?
Okay. Which page is this?
Page 3 of the staff report. So everything on the comments from me on page 2, the first comment's addressed by amendment number 3, the second comment is addressed by amendment number 4, so you've taken care of those. But then the language in 1744-090A, C, and then 1744-110 are contradictory. So 1744-090 provides that only an individual person having a principal residence, and it did say, or a person owning or renting a premises with dwelling units above commercial or maritime may apply for a license. So it is a person who may apply for a license under 1744-090, which is on page 8 of your bill. So page 8, line 12. A short-term rental operating license may be applied for by and issued and renewed to either an individual person having a principal residence or a person owning or renting premises with dwelling units above the ground floor. Then when you go down to C on line 22, an owner having a principal residence should not be issued or renewed more than one license that is not itself the owner's principal residence. And then on the next line, it says, a legal entity having a principal office in the city as registered with the State Department of Assessments and Taxation shall not be issued or renewed more than one license. So if only a person may apply for a license, how do we issue a license to a legal entity? And is that your intent?
So I don't. how
Also,
do we do
there are situations where, like, the city of Baltimore has rental units that it rents out. So it's not the city of Baltimore's principal dwelling. Do we not want to allow government entities to be able to rent their properties out to their delegates and things like that?
Well, I think we do, because it references 17, chapter 17, and 1704 of 650 defines person. says means and includes the federal government, the state, any county, municipal corporation, or other political subdivision of the state, or any of their units, or an individual, receiver, trustee, guardian, executor, administrator, fiduciary, or representative of any kind.
Which one
We're
is,
in
where are you in
partnership.
17?
1704 650
It's not in the ordinance, it's in,
Yeah.
in the code.
Six.
And it says, or any partnership, firm, association.
What is Chapter
Public art.
1704, Alderman Savage?
That's it's the definitions for Title 17, but
Okay, so it is
The
the
leg-
definitions for the entire title.
the legislation under right.
Okay. And what is the definition of person?
But that can be superseded by a
Right, but what is the definition of person?
Person means
It's
it
a-
includes
it's
the
the law,
federal
yeah.
government, the state, and any county, municipal corporation, or other political subdivision of the state, or any of their units or individuals, receiver, trustee, guardian, executor, administrator, fiduciary, or representative of any kind, or any partnership, firm, association, public or private corporation, or any of their affiliates, or any other entity. So it sounds like all the above.
But if only a person, if only an individual person having a principal residence may apply for a license,
So would it make it
how can you
better-
issue one to a legal entity?
So-
The federal government or the state government cannot have a principal residence. So they might meet that definition of person
Right.
for the purposes of Title 17, but they're not going to be a person having a principal residence, ever.
So is it better, does it feel better for you if we say, which is what I think of it as, is that owner provides, so the short-term rental license may be applied for and issued and renewed to an owner having principal residence?
Did you intend for let me ask you this, let me put it a different way. Do you intend for a legal entity having a principal office in the city to be able to obtain a license?
A principal office?
Yes, that's what 1744-090 says.
Neither of us intended any of the specifics. This is language written by Ashley, rewritten, and with input from John Manessa. So I don't know what Ashley meant when she did this. I don't know what the legal, we assumed that she was doing it in an appropriate legal fashion.
so this is the same language that is on page 10, starting with line 31, for the purposes of Chapter 1744, person is given a new definition. It's only an individual.
where?
On page 10,
Page 10, it refers to
Line-
1704.
33, this is,
It refers to 1704.
44.
this is what I guess we need to decide if,
So in the bill as it's proposed is defining person a particular way, and that way excludes, as the bill is drafted, corporations, governments, other political subdivisions, a trustee, a guardian, an executor, an administrator, a fiduciary, etc. That's how it is defined in the bill. So therefore, you could never have a legal entity that would meet the definition of purpose, but 1744-090 allows a legal entity to get a license.
Well, the one way to resolve it could be just to create a new definition for this subtitle for persons.
You could do that. So my question is, what is your intent? Who do you want to be a person?
Our intent was people like who are sitting out here in the audience.
Okay, so
People
then,
running short-term rentals out of their home or another home that they own.
okay, so you don't want it to be a legal entity having a principal office in the city.
Yeah, and that could be a 501c3 or something like that, that has offices right here on Duke of Gloucester.
And you don't want that. Right, okay, well then 1744-090, that language needs to come out, because that's what it says.
Which 1744,
1744-090C, which is on page,
right?
9.
9.
9.
No, 8.
You want to strike the, starting at the end of line 24, the word A, all the way down to the end of 29.
It does not bother me, but I am not the attorney that wrote this. So I think we'll have to go back to the Office of Law and find out why that was put in.
We can do that. That's fine. That was the point of my staff report, is to point out you
Right.
have something in here contradictory that you need to clarify.
That's fine. Okay.
And that will determine what we do on page 10 as well. So once
Right.
we clarify who exactly we want to include as being allowed to rent properties.
So whose court is the ball in? Is it in your court to,
I can check with I can go back to the Office of Law and now that I know your intent,
right?
I think we can clarify it and make it consistent.
Okay. So we have that, and we have the one that, number 10, that we tabled, which I think we also have to go to the Office of Law and
Right.
get more information on.
I have some other questions and
Okay.
as well.
Alderman?
Let's see here. So we've heard a number of concerns over the course of the public testimony we've received, and I wanted to. So one of the concerns had to do with the fact that we only allow residents who have principal residences in the city to acquire and apply for short-term rental licenses, and we allow even people with principal residences. We only allow them, I think, one additional license, right? So we heard some concerns from people who live outside the city, and some in the county, some farther out, some out of state, sure, who they've stated that this may only be their second home. It could have been their home they grew up in, and they just held on to it, and they want to move back into it at some point in time. And so this is their secondary residence, more, it sounds like. It does sounds like they don't have, these people may not have a huge portfolio of properties, but they're being, the way this is written, they would not be able to do any kind of short-term rentals. So we wanted to just throw out the idea of, do we want to, sponsors, do you want to revisit that? Is there a compromise that you would be open to, or do you think it's worthwhile? So one idea I had would be to allow, if people live, so change it. So for people who have principal residence in the city, instead of just allowing them one additional short-term rental, maybe we give them 2 short-term rental licenses. And then for those who live outside the city, either maybe you start with in the county, or maybe you just have, in general, any outside individuals who own properties in the city can have 1 short-term rental license. If we allow them 1, that would at least allow people who, again, live outside the city and may have some property in their family that they can keep and still rent out to a certain degree to get income.
So this is an interesting dialogue that gets you into how many angels on the head of a pin. So I have a constituent, a very good constituent, that only lives 7.3 miles outside of the city. So that person wanted to know, couldn't you make it 10 miles? You could live within 10 miles of the city. This person, like others, actually runs a business in the city. So they say they're available all the time. Many of the other jurisdictions that we looked at have a circle that they draw and say you have to be within it, and the general concept seems to be you need to be easily reachable and be able to get to the property very quickly. And there's a number of ways you can do it. Part of the concept, at least for me, I will only ascribe it to my concept, is I like the idea of these owners being neighbors who you would see at growls, and you would say, gee, I hope you don't rent to a group of people like that again. We had to call the police twice. And right after the police left, they started up again. They just were recalcitrant. So there's this notion of moral suasion that you are going to feel some pressure from your neighbors. In terms of the number of units, again, this is, and there's some wrinkles to this too. These are people who are living in residentially zoned communities that want to run a business, and that business now imposes on neighbors who are living there and there is a regular home. And so we have a street, Fleet Street is one, where there are several of these businesses, and there's an attempt to say, no, we don't want that. Now, the way the bed and breakfast language in our code handles that is they say you can't have more than one of these businesses on the block face. I've been given the understanding that could have some legal problems, that kind of, we've not run into it with our code, but that is something. So there's this notion of trying to find a balance where we don't have the city taken over as a desirable investment target by a whole host of these kinds of things and changing the character of the neighborhood, affecting the quality of life. So there's trying to find this balance of how do we allow this, how do we get the best of this, because this does provide a service. It provides a service that helps businesses that cater to these visitors. So obviously we don't want to squelch it down to nothing. But so in my mind, and I'll only ascribe this to me, you can do your own home and you can do another home as long as you're going to be facing your neighbors on the street or riding bicycles or at corrals or whatever. Is that the exact right number? Yeah, we don't know. There's other numbers we don't know. The 120 days was looking at all of the different jurisdictions and what they came up with. This 120 days is more than some, less than others. Is there a better balance? That's why we asked the real estate people, can you give us some numbers about what are the number of days to achieve a reasonable return on investment? We haven't seen those numbers. When we see some numbers that will help us understand the underlying economics better, that may well be something that we also would be willing to look at. And then there are other things that we need to go through and sort out. Keeping the log is one of the things that I heard people complain about, an invasion of privacy, I think one person said. On the other hand, if we don't have a log, how do we know how many days they rendered it out? So the notion that you have to keep a log, and then John Manessa would come by and say, need to look at your log to see how many days you've rented out, whatever that number comes to. And of course, you could not log in and you could get caught. So you can cheat on this, but you run the risk of getting fined. So of course we're interested in compromise, any compromise, particularly any compromise from one of the people who will be voting on this, to be direct about it.
Well, there's one other piece that staff brought to our attention. You know, your example was different classifications of licenses, pretty much. You didn't use that term, but how is it enforceable? You know, if we have so many different classifications, you know, and if you live a certain distance or, you know, staff has got to be able to manage it. And we don't want to put something in place that we can't oversee, can't
Yeah.
enforce.
Right.
And
Becomes meaningless.
I was going to say, we don't want it to be onerous on the staff, so we want it to be as clean and simple as possible. You know, maybe larger cities, and I'm sure we've seen examples of how others are handling it, but they have huge staffs to do this. We don't, you know, we've got 7 square miles, so it has to be a factor. ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I wasn't I wasn't intending to say, to advocate for different classes. I just think that I think we should have one short-term rental license and application, but just change the allotments, even if it's just allowing people who live outside the city to have to get one short-term rental license. Because, I mean, are they, because I hear you in terms of the being held, you want these folks to be held, the properties to be held accountable to their peers, but I do think there's a provision in your ordinance that would address that in terms of allowing, if there are a number of 3 complaints lodged with the department or with the the police department, then there is an enforcement action. They have to go and essentially defend themselves about why they should be able to keep the short-term rental license. So I think that would hopefully, I think, address the concerns you have.
Can I speak to that?
Oh, sure.
Before you
Yeah.
go on? One of the issues that was brought to us that started this whole discussion, 3 years ago or longer, was because of people not living in the city and having properties. Some who had never resided in the city and who lived thousands of miles away. So, you know, that was the main issue that was brought to us initially. And then when others heard that we were looking at this, we got other issues. We got people from Cornhill Street, you know, speaking to the character of their community changing. But it really was those absent owners that started this whole, opened this floodgate for this legislation. And not just here, but almost every major city in the country is dealing with this in some form or fashion. And we have stacks of articles that we've been sent to share what others, how they're trying to grapple with this.
Yeah.
So.
And who do you see as the major problem here that you're trying to, like, is it the people who own one property, or is it the people who own multiple properties who don't live in the city and are just acquiring properties to rent out on short-term rental? It seems like they would be a larger problem than the ones who just own
Once you
a
move
single.
from residence to investment, you're now having impacts on things other than quality of life. You're now having impacts on bidding up the price of the housing stock, which flies in the face of this workforce housing and affordable housing, fair housing. Now, from the city coffer's point of view, those increased assessments yield more taxes. It's still a question whether it yields additional taxes enough to cover the services, but this makes the nature of the ownership more and more skewed towards people of means, less and less skewed towards others. It also will affect people who are on fixed income. So if you're bidding up the price of the house and the assessment and the taxes, you're now again excluding people on one tail of the distribution. So we have to look at the socioeconomic impacts of this as well as the impacts on the quality of life or the nature of the community character. That to me argues that having this become an investment that is unrestricted is going to change the nature of the pricing of the houses in the community. And it's going to make it a much more, it's going to drive those prices up and all the attendant aspects of that. So there's definitely in my mind this notion that this is something that we need to control, we need to find the right balance, not unlike changing the parking fees. We got to find the right balance there too. getting information, rather than the testimony saying, gee, I need this, getting testimony that gives us substantive numbers that we can look at. I'd like to hear a lot more from the downtown business community about this and talk about the impacts. I'd like to hear from the Visitors Bureau. Connie has been very vociferous about this, and she's been vociferous about the impact this has on hotel days and only 2/3 rent and so forth. We need to get her in here to give us some numbers, not just hearsay. From my perspective, I think we're a long way from having this legislation nailed down, because I think there's a lot of information we still need to go out and get to help us quantify what we're potentially doing here. I'm not interested in saving the neighborhood and killing the downtown businesses. I think we have to find that right balance.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to get a better understanding. I don't think it's as big of a problem in Ward 7, although I think many of us have more short-term rentals than we realize. They're just not being permitted and licensed.
And that, by the way, is the number one thing. The very first principle here is we need to know who's doing this and where they're doing it. And we have to be able to assure ourselves that they're doing it safely, that we're protecting the people that are renting.
But this does a lot more than that, in the sense that it does shut out those people who own one property in the city. And so that's where I'm trying to understand, like, are they a major problem, or is it the combination of the individuals who own property, or is it the people who own multiple properties? What's the major source of the issue you're trying to...
The multiple property owners, the multiple investment, to me, is a problem to be concerned about. Whether it's a problem that we have to address, because if we do, we no longer have people to stay. I mean, a big underlying thing that we've never even talked about is tourism. And tourism isn't something that the city generates by policy. Tourism comes because people are interested in coming here. You know, we can't stop them from coming here, but if they're coming here, we should at least try to accommodate them properly, safely, and in a way that doesn't overly impinge upon the people who live here. You know, we ran into that with the special events legislation. We could have a special event every day of the year, certainly all of the warm days, and so we made a conscious effort to limit the number of special events, and particularly on Sundays, when people were having a hard time getting to church, for those that go on Sunday, and so we could have had a race every single day in the warm weather. Well, so there is definitely this try to get a balance to limit.
Yeah, I understand. But again, I've heard that, I think King George Street, that there are multiple properties on that street that are short-term rentals. Is that a entity or person that's bought up those properties who owns a lot of those properties doing that at once, or is it just a culmination of all the individuals?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure what is the relevance of that question.
Well, because I'm trying to figure out if it's worth not allowing people who own principal residence outside the city, of not allowing them to have one property in the city to have short-term rentals, allowing them one property versus the people who have 5 properties in the city who don't live in the city, who are renting them all out on King George Street. That I see as a problem. If they've 5 homes, that's a big chunk of the neighborhood. But again, if it's just one person who has one property in the city, is that really a problem? Or are you saying there are a lot of people who own one property?
First of all, we don't really know the answer.
Because I'm just saying that because we've heard testimony from it seems like from a lot of those people who do have that one property, and I'm trying to figure out if there's any room for, if it's worth compromising on that.
You would agree that if it's only a number of people from outside the city owning one property, cumulatively, that could still be
It
a
could
lot.
be, yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
the a lot and the impacts of a lot, and there's several of them, is something that we're concerned about
Yeah.
with this legislation.
Okay. All right. so-
Okay, did we get to most of your questions? We're
Well, it
on a
sounds like-
timeline. We have 30 minutes, and we
Okay,
have several people signed up to speak.
Oh, Madam Chair, could I add
Yes.
one thing? I just wanted you to consider the effective date of this ordinance and whether you could give any leeway for people who are currently not in compliance, to give them time to make the improvements they need before they apply for a license. So they're not immediately in violation, but they have maybe a 6-month window or something like that where they know what they need to do, or they can call us and say, what do I need to do? And then
2 years.
I'm
it's
looking
2
for-
years if you currently have a license, but I'm talking about people who do not currently have a license and are renting out their property for short-term rentals, so they're not in compliance with our existing laws. I'd like to give them a little bit of leeway to do the things they need to
you
do.
have-
Where is that in the legislation? I'm looking for it.
Well, it's not. So this legislation is effective immediately upon approval. So I'm just throwing out there the idea that could we be a little bit lenient and show the people who are not in compliant that we're willing to work with them. We'll give them some time to do the repairs, to install the smoke detectors, whatever they need to do, so they can come in and comply with.
So it would be something like if you are currently renting short-term but haven't been inspected, you have,
Without a license.
Well, just that
Without
the
license,
effective
yeah.
date of this ordinance would be 6 months from now.
right.
So people know about it, they know they have to,
Yeah.
in 6 months.
You're
Time's
the
up.
guys that are going to be administering this. You tell us what you want.
Well, I think 6 months would be enough time for us to gear up and, be ready,
Right.
because this could potentially be a lot more inspections that we will need to do.
Right. Rob, I wanted to go back.
May I answer Sally before you go back? Dr. Nash, would you prepare that amendment for us?
For those people who own the house and intend to come back, short-term rental isn't their only option. They can rent it out all year long.
It's true, long-term.
So
yeah.
it's not like there aren't other ways to accommodate this. And we got into a little bit with some of the testimony, the difference between, I think Mr. Bariano brought it up, between short-term and long-term. There's a presumption, not empirical evidence, but a presumption that someone who's renting longer term is going to be here more permanently, realizes they're going to be here, realizes that they need to put their trash out at the right time, not party late, all of those sorts of things. That's a presumption. I don't know that we have evidence of that, but again, long-term rental is another option.
Although I think, but one of the differences is though the owner can't come and stay if they're renting it out long term. They can't come and stay for
Right.
and visit for a few weeks because it's going to be
Right,
occupied
but
by
that's- I mean, they can come, they just can't come
well, they
and
have to
live
stay in a
their house.
hotel but they can't
So-
utilize their property.
Again, this balance of the quality of life, the community character for the people who do live here and who, by the way,
Yeah,
pay our taxes and vote for us
yeah,
and
Right,
complain
yeah.
to us about it when things go wrong.
yeah.
We need to realize that they also have skin in this game and need to get consideration.
Yeah, and if I could have just a few other before we run out of time, because the other concerns we've heard over the course of the testimony has to do with the 120 days. Is there any? Do you think that 120 days is the right target to set? The other concern we've heard has to do with the licensing process. Some people have said it's a burdensome process, I guess, for people who are doing the short-term rentals, be it the cost or the inspection requirements.
That's the same process everybody else who rents has to go through.
Yeah.
So that one doesn't carry any weight with me.
And so for the code, because it does say they have to comply with the applicable current code, be it the smoke detectors and whatnot, or other building codes. So I imagine some homes would have to undergo a significant amount of work. I mean, what if it's a historic home that, I know to a certain degree, I think some of the code may be grandfathered. I'm not sure if some of these properties are grandfathered for some of these code requirements. That might be a question for Dr. Nash, I suppose.
And actually, we had that discussion with Mr. Manassas while we were having.
Okay.
And I think they all require hardwiring.
That's
But,
right. And carbon monoxide detectors.
But again,
Okay.
that's a public safety concern.
Right, but normally people wouldn't have to comply with that unless they were renovating their property,
Right.
right?
But
or some
again,
other
they're
requirement kicks
renting
it
their
in.
property out
Yeah.
to somebody else.
So that was, those are basically my concerns. In 120 days, did you have anything you wanted to say about that? Was that what the other jurisdictions typically use
We
for
had talked
short-term
about
rentals?
potentially changing.
To me, there's two bits of information that I would like to see before we finalize. One would be the whole information from the Downtown Partnership and from the Visitors Bureau, and then the information from the real estate people to give us a sense of, can you make it on 120 days and get a decent return on equity? I mean, we're not expecting people to do this as a philanthropy.
Yeah.
We're assuming they've chosen to go into this business because they want to get a return
Yeah.
on investment. So, and I don't even know what we have in mind for what's a fair return on investment. But we need more information on that.
Okay.
And that would affect the number of days. The number of residents, I think, would be information from the Annapolis Business Partnerships and from the Visitors Bureau.
Okay. That's all. Thank you,
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. We have several people who want to speak, and we have 24 minutes.
Okay? So I would ask that we hear new things rather than the same things. And my preference and my need is to hear things that speak directly to how would you change the legislation, not you don't like the legislation.
Okay, well, I agree. And we've restricted our speakers to 3 minutes, so I would ask you to respect our timeline. And the first speaker is Jackie Sweetek. Afternoon.
Can you please turn on your mic?
Is it on?
Now it is. My husband and I own 26 South Street, and we are residents of Millington, Maryland. And you guys have heard about how, as it's written, this would be devastating for us. So I have prepared a statement just for the Rules Committee. We've been a owner-operator for 7 years, and we have always been licensed. I would recommend, we've always been licensed. We take care of our trash upon your rules. We've never missed a city inspection or failed a city inspection. Our building has a sprinkler system. We're fully monitored. Those are things that you may want to think about. And we live within 50 miles of Annapolis, which used to be the written rule for short-term rental licenses. When I first started this business 7 years ago, and renting is a business, that was the rule, 50 miles away. So I attract a high-quality tenant, and I think that we actually are an asset to our community. Our building looks a whole lot better now than it did 11 years ago when we purchased it. Moving forward, I think the city should start enforcing the rules they already have in place. You guys have some great rules in place. Use them. All short-term rentals should be licensed and or registered, and there should be a graduated system for licenses and or registration based on the rental itself. What I'm offering is different than what an Airbnb room is. If there's ever a noise or safety complaint, it should be documented. If there's a consistent issue, the property owner should not be able to get a renewal, or they have to prove that they've taken steps to improve the issue. I don't know why we're cutting everybody off at the knees when some people have done this really, really well for a long period of time. People coming to Annapolis to stay at my apartments are not a safety burden to the city. They're coming to relax, spend money, and visit with family members, often at the Naval Academy, St. John's, or just people who live here that don't have space to accommodate them in their own homes. We do not attract a party crowd by any means. As you can see, I've taken all the rules of the city very seriously and complied. This legislation is punishing owner-operators like me who are just trying to maintain their second home, and this is a second home. That's all I have to say that's new.
Thank you. Alderman Savage?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. Just a question again. Excuse me. I'm trying to understand things better. So why did you choose, it sounds like, so your rentals are short-term rentals.
They are.
Why did you choose to do that instead of long-term for your properties?
When we purchased this property in 2008, it had 2 standard 12-month leases in place, and those people lived there for several years. We renovated the first floor, and it was zoned office space, or we rezoned as office space at that time. And then when we were done with that, the folks upstairs, we kind of took on that project, and they had abused the property to the point that it had to be, we had to replace all the appliances, we had to repaint, the floors had to be redone. I mean, just everything was horrible. And we have found this through years of renting. We have a vacation rental at our house as well that had been rented out to standard leases before, and people, even though they were very nice, they were abusive because it's just a 1-bedroom apartment they don't care about. So when we converted the one, and within a day I had a week-long rental. The day that I posted it on VRBO, I had a week-long rental. My husband didn't believe me. And from then on, they have just rented beautifully. The second one that we did, I had a month-long rental in place before we finished. There's a huge demand for these. People don't want to stay in hotels. So if you want us to collect and remit taxes that benefit the city, please make that a law. I will comply. But these are very sought out. People want to stay in a nice homestay.
We're going to get to this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next speaker, Julian Donnelly.
Before my time starts, I just wanted to answer one of the questions about King George Street and how we know. On the 100 block of King George Street, there are 2 short-term owners, and one other owner owns at least 10 to 12 other long-term units on one block of the 100 block of King George Street. I know that because I've owned there for 15 years.
So you said one owner owns...
One owner owns
how many?
An additional 10 to 12 units. Off the top of my head, I don't know. I'm trying to count in my head. 10 to 12 units on the 100 block plus an office space. Long-term. Long-term. There's 2 short-term owners. Then there's one other owner who owns 10 to 12 long-term units plus an office space on the 100 block of King George.
Get those numbers from them.
Okay. Yeah, but this wouldn't impact long-term rentals.
No, but you were asking that.
But there-
so
you said
there's no primary residence on that street, on that block at all.
You said there are a few short-term rental
There's 2 of
owners?
us.
2 of you who do short-term.
2 of us that do short-term. Mine
how
is
many
a
properties
3-unit.
do you own in the
Mine is a
city?
3-unit building. It has been a 3-unit since the 40s or 50s.
So with this legislation, if there's 3 units within one building, would this...
So I have 1 premise, 3 dwelling
How would
units.
this
I get
impact?
1 city license. It says 3 units. I pay $600 a year for licensing fees.
And do you live in the city or outside?
I do not live in the city, but I live 15 minutes away.
Okay, let her please get started.
Okay. Hi, I'm Julian Donnelly at 165 King George Street. Who's your typical short-term renter? For me, it's a Naval Academy family, an alumni, someone coming to lecture at the Academy, or someone who is coming to attend a conference there. Their typical stay is 3 to 5 nights in length. I've also had delegates there for 95 days. 130 days, I had a mother and a son who wanted to finish out their senior year of high school after their home rented out, and the husband had already gone on to St. Louis. I also had a 145-day rental where it was a separated couple who would alternate who stayed there. One would stay with the kids, and then the other one would stay there. That was for 145 days. We also get boat show vendors for about 3 weeks. I've had published novelists, journalists, and newscasters there as well. In more than 400 rentals, I've only had 1 issue that I know has happened. Nobody ever complained about it. I had a bad feeling. I went to go check on the property and shut it down very quickly. But out of 400, I think 1 problem is pretty good. If we are not allowing these people to stay there for more than 120 days, where are these people going to go? They're going to go stay elsewhere, and then their money will not be coming into the city. 93% of my guests have given me a 5-star rating over the last 3 years. The city inspectors that have come have said they wished all the owners were as vigilant as we are in maintaining our properties. They have always complimented us on how kept up they are and things like that. I even rented one for 6 weeks while doing an MBA internship in Charleston, South Carolina. It allowed my children to come and visit with me and not be confined to a hotel room while I was at work all day. If I am licensed, the person accepting any form of payment for commissioning week or boat show should also be licensed, even if it's for 1 week or 2 weeks. Fire code is fire code. If something tragic were to happen and they don't have emergency exits or their fire alarms are not hardwired throughout, they should be held to the same standards that we are. And my question comes into the 3-unit dwelling. We've been 3 units for as long as the 40s and 50s, so how is that going to impact me? Also, if you're doing just principal residence, that person's not going to be local. If they're renting out their principal residence, they've gone away somewhere. They've gone on vacation. They're on a cruise. They are in another country. How are they going to get there quickly? I'm 15 minutes away, but I'm not, quote, a city resident. You asked about return on investment. Between taxes and just insurance, I pay $10,500 a year. That's 84 nights for me just to cover taxes and insurance. Doesn't cover my mortgage. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions? And I was not aware you were looking for numbers on return of investment. I've been an agent for, this is my 19th year. I can also get you numbers in addition to the numbers that he may be able to get you.
Thank you.
Yeah, please do.
The next speaker, Chris Ledoux. And may I ask, again, as Alderman Arnett has mentioned, that we're looking for recommendations on what we can do to address the issues.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Alderperson. So I'll talk quickly, and I wish the city manager was here so we could clear up some confusion. First, with regard to amendment number 10 and this idea of individual persons and legal entities, et cetera, just so you understand, normally the definition of person in law, and as the alderperson showed in section 1704, is very broad, right? It includes what we call in law natural persons is usually how we refer to, actual human beings, and persons include legal entities, et cetera. What happened here was on the eve of one of the attorneys in the Office of Law needing to go out on a long-term leave, there was sort of this fury on the last day. And John Maness and I have been trying to fix some unintended confusion here. So the city manager is correct that there's some confusion, but I think eventually this can all get reconciled. I think, though, the committee and the council probably does not just want it to be natural person, because I thought there was an intent to help the sort of restaurant owners on Main Street or the business owners on Main Street that had apartments above their businesses. And just from experience, I would think that those commercial property owners probably are in the form of LLCs or business entity names. So it's something for you to consider. I'm a natural person. I don't have any LLCs, so I have no stake in that, but I think that's something you need to think about. The reason why in the definition of principal residence, the definition is tied to your driver's license, your filing of your income taxes, etc., is because that's the definition in the state regulations called COMAR, Title 18. Now, it says that John Manessa and his staff can rely on whether the box is checked on the MDAT website. But what we found, some of us found, was that there's a great deal of errors in that. We have found that if a person puts their mailing address to be the property address, it's checked. And we have found out-of-state owners who are listed on the website as principal resident. At the same time, I've been involved in a small group of residents who've been working on these issues for some time. We found members of our own group that live in their house, and when we went on the MDAT website, were not checked, right? So simply putting an ordinance, whatever is checked on the computer, can lead to a lot of, let's say, ingenuity for someone that wants to maybe loophole your rules. as a lawyer, I'm trained to read and interpret and analyze law. You can't help realize that there are ways to get around things. So that's why it's carefully crafted that way.
So, excuse me, Chris.
You're eating up my time. Okay, go ahead.
Now, we need to ask this. So, what do we do with Amendment 10? Right now, we're striking out from the back end of line 31 all the way through, and the city manager has raised this issue. So, do we have to go back to the Office of Law to get that straightened
Yeah,
out?
I think there's more work to be done with planning and zoning staff and the Office of Law. I don't think people are in disagreement. I just think the language isn't kind of harmonizing.
So tabling it and getting back, Sally and Office of Law getting back to us, okay.
But I wanted to explain the intent or why that was framed the way it is. On Amendment 9, which is this idea of striking or dwelling unit, and I know there was kind of a typo there because it was a last-minute change, but on the or dwelling unit, the 120 days, I believe, and I'm kind of speaking as if I was John Manessa because this is his amendment, but I think the idea was that if you're, like, let's say you have a house with a nanny flat, and you're still on the property, so you're upstairs or you're in the back part of the house, as long as you're on the property, that's not the 120 days. The 120 days is when, you throw somebody the keys and you go off to Ocean City or something. Right. So the dwelling unit was important for the nanny flat because of its premises. And again, this is John's amendment, so I'm not, this isn't something I'm arguing for, but I think that's John's logic, and that's why it was suggested.
But now what we've done is instead of striking dwelling units, we're saying dwelling unit.
Right, because if I let somebody in the dwelling unit, I'm not present in the dwelling unit, but I'm present on the premises.
So
you see,
right.
So the John Manessa's amendment number 9 is wise, in my personal opinion.
So you wouldn't go with the way we've changed it, which says for dwelling units, like we did.
Right, I would not, but I'm not elected or have a say.
That's the worst thing we get wrong.
No, I just wanted to explain, that's all, because Mr. Manessa is not here, but I have a feeling I understand why he was proposing the amendment. Alderperson Savage, look, 1 for a city resident, 2 for, 12, how far you live, that's a policy call, right? I think the idea, what a lot of other cities and counties have done is they create a radius, right? So I think, it's either PG County or Baltimore says, now Baltimore is in the city, I think it's PG County says like 30 miles, right? So you could say 30 miles, but somewhere along the way we said, look, we're the city, that's our radius, right? Look, one other, if you're outside, et cetera, that's a policy call. I've heard some people suggest that if you don't live within the city, that you at least have a licensed property manager in the city. Because what I have heard from the people on the blocks that seem to have these bad experiences is there's nobody to call, right? There's not their neighbor or someone who lives locally, so that's a way to address it. And and then just real quick on your burden argument, and Alderman Arnett, a lot of these requirements, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide, lead, yeah, they're in our code, but it's really state law. These are state law burdens. Right. And while the burden is on the property owner, sure, if I want to live in a house and not keep my house safe, or I'm grandfathered until I do major renovations, that's one thing, but it's really about the safety of the people coming. My fear isn't fire. I think people pretty much manage well for fire. My fear is the terrible stories we read every year in the winter where the family goes to bed and doesn't wake up because of the carbon monoxide because they didn't know they had a crack in their heat exchanger. That kind of thing. That's where I think the real risk lies. But anyway, thank you.
Before you go, and we just got an email today from Jack, somebody, but there's all kinds of court cases that are going on. This one today he talks about a Supreme Court decision written by Justice Alito about Total Wine
Alita.
versus Tennessee, there's Guy versus Baltimore, there's Maryland versus Wayne. And we've been throughout it looking at all of the stuff. I think New York City had some stuff thrown out, DC, so on and so forth. But we've been trying to stay on top of all of these legal things. Have you had a chance to look at any of these?
Yeah, I think that for the most part, and I would note that you have not received any sort of legal analysis or 3 or 4 page letter from a lawyer, laying it. I think people, might read secondary articles about what the opinions say, et cetera. All of those are distinguishable. The Tennessee case deals with interstate commerce. Wouldn't apply here because you aren't treating, you are treating Maryland citizens who happen to be outside the city the same way you're treating out-of-state citizens. So it wouldn't apply. And even in the Tennessee case, it said if there is a legitimate local purpose to this. I mean, it's not an absolute Commerce Clause violation. It's not even applicable here. New York City was thrown out because there was a requirement in the New York City Code that the platforms turn over their lists of their registered hosts, and that was found to be in violation of the Fifth Amendment. So while these get headlines and get a lot of attention, at least in my case, I have read as much as any case that anybody's raised in my own research. I have not found a dispositive situation except in one instance. And I will tell you there is no Maryland court case to date that has ruled against what any of the other cities and municipalities. I mean, what you're doing here is not novel. Ocean City, Prince George's County, Baltimore, DC. I mean, this is not. I mean, I'm not offending. I hope I'm not offending you that you're breaking new ground here. But a lot of people in a lot of places and a lot of lawyers have looked at these things, and a lot of the elements in your ordinance are modeled after other approaches similar cities and counties have taken. So, I mean. That's my view. But, look, court is another branch of government. If somebody wants to spend the money and challenge it, as a lawyer, I'd love the court's guidance on these things. But, so, thanks.
Can I ask one question? So the 120 days, is that pretty standard for the other jurisdictions you've looked at?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I think the 120 days, because when people talk about the sharing, I think the way the sharing economy has worked is this is supposed to be a part-time thing. This is, I'm sharing my house, I'm sharing my car, I'm sharing my driveway. If you're doing this full-time 365 days, become a hotel, a motel, a bed and breakfast, or an inn, if you're zoned for that, where you want to do it. Whether it's 120, 90, it was just trying to figure out what is. I think there was some thinking like if there's 3 days in a weekend, they check in Thursday to Sunday, 120 days total ends up being 10 months of this stuff on weekends. Look, you can draw the line anywhere. One idea I heard someone say, I'm not, it's not me, but I heard someone also say that maybe don't count the boat show commissioning weekdays in the 120 since you're kind of exempting that from all of this, and that would get people up to 141, say, but, it's really a policy call. I have no data to know what's profitable or not because I don't run this in that kind of model. So. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Mary Purdy.
Hi, Mary Purdy, 724 Mills Way. And I just wanted to make the statement, thank you for looking broader at the situation. I live in Anne Arundel County. My husband owns, and I own a business in the city of Annapolis. And we bought a house so that he could go there between work. And at this point in our life, we want to start renting it out. So while we don't live in the city of Annapolis, I would appreciate being able to rent it out in the future. So thank you for looking at the bigger picture of how it impacts a lot more people, because I think from what I've seen, the legislation was just much too narrow. Thanks.
Thank you. And lastly, Hannah Garagiola. She had to go? Oh, okay. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Come on down.
Hi, guys. Megan Moore, 86 Charles Street, 58 Madison Place. Once again, I would just suggest, like Chris said as well, the consideration of a property manager. And maybe, and I've seen it before, and I actually just got back from Carlisle, Pennsylvania today, which is a very small town, and they're really into short-term rentals because they're into bringing tourism, and we're looking at potentially, if this goes through, selling my Annapolis place and investing over there. So when talking to their city code, even with their long-term renters, they make it so that there has to be a registered person in the city, and that each neighbor knows exactly who they are. So, you know, it's just another thing that to think about, you know, when you have all these people with their second homes that potentially live in the state of Maryland or somewhere, if they had someone somewhat, you know, within our little city zone that they could write down as a point of contact that could be there. You know, I really thought Joanne made a good point where the people that are renting out their primary residences aren't there when the people are there. So who's going to come when there's the problem? So, okay.
So,
yeah.
you know, so this is something we need to think through. You do this. You have, what, 7 different properties that you are sort of the resident
So I own 2.
manager?
Yeah, I own, and one of mine is a duplex. So I live on one side and we rent out the other side. So I'm on premises. I know what's going on, you know, all the time. My other is my 86 Charles Street house, which was a absolutely unsellable property. We tried. We can't. So my things are in there. I don't want a long-term, actually, long-term renting it out isn't even an issue. So it's, you know, my neighbor's in such bad shape. Nobody wants to look at it. So, but the short-term renters don't mind. So anyway, that being said, yeah, so most of my neighbors, I got approached by one of my neighbors who's a doctor that wants to retire there, and she asked me if I could come watch her house when she has the short-term rentals. I actually have neighbor testimony too that they're going to email you, that my neighbors like love having the shorter rentals and like having me.
So
But anyway,
let me ask you how it would work. We create something saying that there's a resident manager, they have to get certified, so forth, so on. And that would be the person that the city would call when there's whatever it is, the
trash,
pipes,
snow, anything.
trash, the pipes
Yeah.
break.
Yeah,
so
Mary
on and so
Emmerich
forth.
agreed with that too. You know, when she was there, she thought it was a
And
kind of a solid idea.
You would be, presumably, you would be paid to do that?
Sure. I mean, you know, obviously, I mean, I'm paid as a property manager for mine, but I mean, however somebody would figure that out with their person.
So they rent for a week, it's next week, and you want to go to Ocean City next week. How does that all work out?
I don't ever get to go away, so I don't get to go away. I went away for one night last night. That's it. I mean, literally.
Right.
But mind you, I can't. Somebody that's a professional property manager, you don't get to do that. You have somebody here that's taking care of everything because people don't even know how to use key boxes.
Okay.
So.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So, again, trying to make this as simple as possible. Every time we start doing something where we're going to say, well, you can live in New Jersey if you have a resident agent kind of thing, then we're going to have to start doing all of the legislation to identify all of that and figure out how we're going to make sure that happens. And that is in order to make sure that people who are living here in their own home are protected so that if something is done wrong. So, you know, I
think you could easily do that on the application.
Yeah, on the application, wouldn't you think?
Right, no, I know, but I'm saying that.
It is another step.
There's a whole nother step that if we're even thinking about that, we need to work on the legislation. That's why I think we have a while to go before
Before we sleep.
We done?
Thank you.
Yeah.
You guys get to go home?
Anyone else like to speak? Sir? Did you ever get the information?
How are you? Jason Brand, and
Hi.
Arundel County Association of Realtors.
Make sure your microphone's on.
It is. I'm just tall. So I want to just briefly address, and again, we just got in kind of a little bit of an analysis today, so I definitely will be following up shortly with some ideas. As far as the economic analysis, I would love to help you out on that, but I'm sure that the economics of each individual person that runs their individual bed and breakfast is going to change dependent on when they actually purchase the price and what they're how much they have to carry as far as their mortgage and so on and so forth. I mean, there was testimony as regard to taxes and insurance and how many days that would take of coverage, but then you would have to throw on top of that whatever that mortgage was. So do you know what you were looking for, just like a number for if it was a sale today on a 500 square foot home in downtown Annapolis, or one bedroom bath or something?
No, I asked you first.
Okay. Okay. Because I think that's going to vary across the board.
Well, and it may be that, and so that leaves it that it's pretty much we need to make the decision as the people that are going to be voting on this. But there must be some information that is sort of like the average or even like a middle thing, and then
maybe we could run those
like
numbers in a bunch of different, several different scenarios.
Yeah.
Then.
So,
in that case.
and it's not just the information for the people who have decided to do this kind of business. It's also the businesses downtown. We need to be understanding that. Suppose we said it was 90 days, we've voted, and now 2/3 of all of these businesses say, well, we're either going to sell or we're going to go to long-term rental. Is that going to mean that Eric Evans is now going to say, oh my God, we are the restaurants, a third of the restaurants are going to go out of business because they just don't have enough people? I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. It's not just the one
Has there
thing.
been any consideration of just an overall economic study? I mean, on the potential of cutting the times back. I say that only because I saw something today talking about.
So right now, it seems like we have more and more restaurants. It doesn't seem like there's a shortage of restaurants. We have 2 more that are going to go in on 4th Street in Eastport, in Ward 8. So that doesn't seem to be a problem. We also understand that a third of the hotels are not having people there. Now, maybe hotels can start rolling back what they're charging. Instead of $500, maybe it's $300. It would seem to me like the natural economics, the natural, I'm trying to think of the right word here, market, the market should start to get this stuff so that it is equilibrium. It makes its adjustment. So, but what we're really worried about is if we go way over and make a major problem that makes this big change, not only for the short-term rental, but for the businesses downtown, the residences and those sorts of things. So it's a bigger issue than just this. And remember, this legislation is not just about short-term rentals. The short-term rentals are unique in that we don't know who's doing it. We don't have that information. We do know who's long-term. We know who's hotels, all of those things. But it's a bigger issue than just short-term rentals that we need to be taking account. And as I was saying earlier, there's a whole problem of what we're doing in terms of raising the cost of housing, when at the same time in other things we're trying to find workforce housing and fair housing and the income moderate income people. So it is turned into this really much bigger thing that we have to think about as policymakers on the council.
Well, I certainly appreciate your deliberating through this, because you've definitely put in time. I will certainly look into some of that and get your comments, though, this week. So, I would say only one thing is, like, the market itself, though, is you're balancing a market that's constantly in flux. So that's a little difficult as well to kind of get a handle on, in my opinion. Yeah. So, there's a lot of other factors that go into the price of the home, mostly interest rates, or how's the job market. I mean, right now it is, I agree with you, like it's a very good market right now, but the same wasn't true 10 years ago, so or 11, so those can be affecting factors as well. So,
all right, well,
all right,
thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks.
Okay.
So we have two more pieces of legislation, unfortunately.
They go along with the ordinance.
They're the resolutions that go along with the ordinance.
Do
you want to talk about them today? Or?
No, I'm going to have to postpone those.
Yeah,
I've gotta get
I do want to say, though, that I think we should be looking at the fines much more closely. I don't think we have a lot of information there. Many people have said to us that we have other means to make sure that we're not having adverse impacts on residents, and that is a lot more fines, making, if you continue to be a bad business, that you get your license taken away, period. But there's another aspect of the fees, which is that is one of the things that is a cost that the city is bearing. That's a, what's the word, can't think of the economic term for people who are free riders. And that we send our police over there, and they go over several different times, and then as soon as they leave, people, well, we need to have like a scale. So the first time you pay X amount of fee, the next time it's double, the third time, and then we also have that thing using the state citation thing, which says you have to come to court, which is one of the things that it really starts to put people on order. But we should be charging fines that cover the cost of running, taking care of all these things.
So we'll postpone deliberations on R30 and R31 until the next meeting, which
will be September.
Will be in September. We'll have to be reminded of what we talked about.
Yeah.
So
and then the only other group that I think is meeting is Finance later on. I think the 17th. But
Oh, no, it's not.
Well, not about this though.
And I think that we've got a lot of information and things we need to get from the administration. So
was this going to Economic Matters?
But
Economic Matters is a meeting until
That's
September.
the one
yeah.
that it was actually referred to.
What,
code,
Economic
okay.
Matters?
And
All
it's
right.
going to housing as well.
And housing? Is Mark chairing both of those? Oh, so that they won't be heard until September either.
Well, Economic Matters will be the second week of September. I don't know when housing.
So
All
just
right,
to
well,
make
we'll
us,
take it
I
up.
would move that we postpone discussion of R30 and R31 until September.
I'll second.
That's the fees and the fines.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move that we adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
All right. I have to say,
So late, yeah.